This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for.
I wanted to do a video today about what I think is the most unique pedal company out there in the world. Now, if I talk to you about a company that specializes in digital products that doesn't update the algorithms, that's super unusual, right? Like Boss, for example, with the GX or GT, that sort of stuff. I think they kind of proved the rule, I think, for me, which is that, you know, if you don't update your algorithms in the digital space, that you actually fall behind in terms of attention. Somehow, Strymon managed to break most of the rules of these pieces of gear, such that the algorithms actually outlast the hardware. So you think about, you know, imagine if Line 6 released a Helix Stadium and it didn't have any new algorithms. Like, what would there be to talk about, and what sort of backlash might they get for that? You know, you bring out the Brigadier, or the Flint. You bring out version 2, which essentially is the same algorithm, but they've just given you like a little bit more tweakability, the same sound. I think it's a really interesting company, and they've done some really interesting things. So let's talk about it a bit. This is the thing, right? So Pete Celi, I think that's how you say his name, used to work for Line 6. Before that, I think he worked for Alesis. And he is the DSP, senior DSP engineer, I believe, at Line 6 at a certain point in time, obviously before Strymon was around. So this was at a time when Line 6 was actually slightly cheaper gear, I think, and they were still in that sort of pod spider kind of realm of time. I think, you know, the DL4 existed here and like the M4 and that line of effects, which I think really would those were classics, and I think that's also what has been replaced. So the Line 6 DL4, you know, absolutely ubiquitous delay. But at this point, I think Line 6 are more known for, I guess, like a bit more, less classic, more as a platform than anything else at this point, right? Like the Helix platform where they continually bring new DSP revelations to the game and sort of stuff like that. As I say, I don't think that you can necessarily bring out new hardware too successfully without having updated algorithms for most other bits of gear, right? Whether it's Fractal or whoever, you know, Quad Cortex. I don't know, I guess maybe it doesn't work so well if the thing doesn't have a long history. But kind of the point for me is that the Helix, the Kemper as well, like, to keep these things interesting, they've had to update their algorithms, essentially. Strymon somehow have managed to avoid this altogether. And I think part of it is that for somehow they seem to get things really right straight away. And you kind of get into this realm where the Strymon pedal kind of instantly comes out sounding like a classic. And that's maybe something that other companies have not managed to do quite so well. And maybe that is like the unique quality of Pete Celi as a designer. So I think of pedals like the Brigadier. So that's like a bucket brigade delay. I think of the Flint. You know, that's a pedal that has made it onto so many pros boards. You know, whether it's John Mayer, Julian Lage. You know, people that could, you know, especially like in John Mayer's case, could afford to put anything on their board, and yet go with a Strymon device. I think that's super interesting. Jeff Beck used to have, I think the El Capistan was on his. There's so many of these classic pedals, like the Strymon Deco to me is not a pedal that on paper, if you said to me, right, well what we've got here is like a little bit of a double tracker thing and then a bit of tape saturation. And then I plug it in, I'm like, well this is a magical pedal. And I don't have that with every other single thing that I've ever tried. You know, you try these things and you think, well that's cool, it does a thing. But for some reason for me, when I plug in a Strymon device, oftentimes I have a bit more of a wow type situation going on. Now, what is it that is going on with that? So, first of all, I think it speaks to confidence in terms of like, you know, do they need to update the Flint, the Deco and stuff like that in terms of like, oh, we've totally redone all the algorithms? No, I think it speaks to like the quality and the confidence in this that they just go, well, we've done that and it's still great today. I think the market, people seem to respond to that. And then the other thing that's going on with Strymon stuff is that I find that actually it goes beyond what you might expect. And the Deco is kind of a classic example of that. So this tape saturation element of it, they've got like cassette and classic. It literally says in the manual that we kind of taken what you could do with the real piece of gear that it was emulating, and then we've gone beyond. So what you actually end up with this pedal, the saturation can just be used as a real drive pedal, and it sounds really, really good for that. And that's what I was using in the intro. And this is something that I feel like Line 6 don't do as much of in their effects, where it's like, I definitely noticed with the El Capistan, where the tape wobble elements of it, if you absolutely max out the Line 6 sort of tape wobble, the things that are making these things unique, it gets to like maybe 2 or 3 on where the Strymon stuff starts. So I just think Strymon like take it from like the realistic realm into a more like, well, what if we took these principles and then exploded them into a situation where it's like, well, this is tape wobble, but like you never heard it before. Do you know what I mean? That to me is what Strymon seem to do partly. And you think of like, you know, their Big Sky, their reverbs and delays. That is, I think, part of what makes Strymon pedals so great is that they've gone, right, well, what is the character of this thing that we're doing? And what if we multiplied that? And not so, you know, you go like 10 or 20% beyond what you could do in real life. But, okay, we're going to go, well, what if you could go 100%? Or that kind of principle, I think, really works very well. I don't know that necessarily... There was a time like 2014, 2015 where Strymon were super, like, that is the brand. And you'd see, like, the Strymon trifecta. I feel like maybe that era is gone, partly. But I still feel like the Strymon have their classics that you still see, like, all over the place. And I think those are, like, the Flint, the Dig. I think you've got to say, like, the Big Sky and the Blue Sky. I think it's the reverbs and the delays more than anything else that where it's like, all right, I really want a lovely delay. Okay, well, Strymon, that is a good answer to that particular question. Or I want a great reverb. Strymon, a great answer to that question. In a way that other companies, I don't have those same answers in the same way. I think another part of what Strymon have done so well, because this is digital, like, shark-based processing, right, is that they've not gone down the realm where you need to have any knowledge of particularly how to use the thing very much. Like, on the face of it, it's quite cleverly designed to make complex sort of things that would take lots of parameter tweaks in a certain modeler, if you had that, and it's tied to one knob. And I think that's a really clever sort of bit of design that is maybe overlooked until you actually think about, okay, well, is this doing more than just volume, or is there other stuff going on behind? When I turn this knob, it's doing several things at once, or tone, or, you know, I think that's one element as well with the Strymon, where it's, you don't have to be really clever, not clever even, but have loads of experience to get sounds out of these that are wildly impressive. On the best of the Strymon effects, I think that's the case. Certainly, like, this single format I find really, like, instantly gratifying. I don't necessarily think the Timeline and the Big Sky are quite as necessarily satisfying as that straight away, because it goes more into that multi-effect sort of realm, where I think this kind of sweet spot of where you've got, like, two effects in there, essentially, like an ADT and then a saturation, or like the Flint where you've got a trem and a reverb. Those seem to actually be where Strymon really do shine, I think. Let me know in the comments your favourite Strymon pedals. I've tried quite a few. I don't think I've tried them all. But I think there is, like, a little bit of a downside here where, like, the Strymon Iridium, which for a time was definitely a very impressive pedal that a lot of people were interested in. I think the hype has largely died completely down in that kind of area. I think purely because most other amp modeling gear, you'd be looking at something where there's updates coming and there's continuing to be reasons to talk about that specific piece of gear. I do think there is a bit of a downside for Strymon in that regard. I also would say that some of the more recent releases from Strymon, I see way less about, and it's often like a bit of a surprise when a Strymon device comes along. So, like, that oil can delay, like, where did that come from? Is that selling well? Are people interested in it? Or some of these other, like, smaller format, so is it like the ultraviolet Univibe? They've started this smaller format, which I kind of appreciate, but at the same time it's a bit like, well, are those making as big of a splash as the classic Strymon pedals? So maybe that the golden era of Strymon, is that possibly not gleaming as brightly as it used to? I don't know, but I would say I absolutely love a bunch of Strymon pedals. Do I own any? No. This is my buddy Jake's Deco, but would I happily own, like, a Flint, a Deco, a few of these kind of pedals that you could just stick on your board and it's like, it's digital. And that is the other surprising thing, where it's like, if I said to you, like, what digital pedal has been like universally accepted by some of the greats like that are really fussy, like Bukovac, like John Mayer, some of these guys, and Strymon seems to be like the one piece of digital gear that pretty much everyone is happy to stick on their board and agrees that it sounds really good and doesn't interfere. That's really interesting for me in a way that no other like primarily digital piece of gear has managed to crack anywhere near that I can remember this kind of acceptance and this kind of praise, even still in 2025. I think Strymon takes a really special place within the market, especially when you think this is a digital company, right? Making digital gear largely. They do it really well.